Yes, so we were talking about John Vervaeke's idea of truth and relevance kind of being divorced from one another. He talks a lot in his series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, about how our time is somewhat parallel to the time of the ancient Greek philosophers Plato, Aristotle, and a little before and a little after that. And there are similar philosophies that are coming up now, like he thinks Stoicism, which originated in that time. Uh, he points out that that's getting more popular nowadays. And this has to do with living in a kind of time of tumult. And also of that idea of truth and relevance kind of being divorced from one another. So just real quick historical kind of background. The pre-Socratic philosophers, the ones that lived before Socrates, are called natural philosophers, and they started to explain natural phenomena not in terms of gods and things, but just as natural phenomena, like the sun is a giant rock in the sky, burning rock in the sky, or something like that. And it's an interesting thing that they were doing, but so they were concerned with what is the actual truth of natural phenomena, not just what is this story that we've always told about things and just kind of going with that and believing that. But their accounts, there wasn't really very much relevance to people's everyday lives, unlike with the previous narratives of natural phenomena, where like the sun was a god, or it's like everything was a god or powered by gods and things in that sort of animated nature. Everything was alive. There was danger or safety or moral meaning everywhere. The world was alive with meaning. And now the we were getting closer to the truth in some ways, but uh the truth wasn't relevant to our lives. So in step, the sophists, that's the word where we get the word sophisticated, and they were people that were part of this movement in Greece that was the part of using rationality to persuade others. This was obviously a big part of their democracy in Athens. The thing about the sophists, though, was they're kind of akin to our lawyers nowadays in some ways, whereas the natural philosophers were akin to like the scientists that we have today. The sophists were concerned with and taught principles of rhetoric, how to persuade people, but without concern for what is true. They were just, you know, whoever hired them, they could argue for their client's point of view. It didn't matter what was true or false. They were just arguing for just to persuade people. So they were unconcerned with truth, but totally concerned with what is relevant to the people listening, what is salient to them, what persuades them. So then you have Socrates, who kind of was against both of them. He was concerned with truth, like the natural philosophers, but he wanted truth to be relevant to people, to their souls, to their lives, to personal transformation. Which Plato writes a lot about. And he was, of course, against the sophists who were unconcerned with truth, only concerned with relevance. So Plato's dialogues has a lot of verbal combat between Socrates and the sophists. But yeah, so John Vervaeke has this idea that we want to get out of the meaning crisis that we have currently by being in touch with truth that is relevant. So obviously, we live in a world awash with a lot of scientific truth about the natural world and things that are being invented all the time because of that very sophisticated knowledge. But we're at the same time we're sort of like spiritually lost and divided and everything. And it also seems like we do have a lot of modern day sophists like on YouTube or in the political world and advertising uh, that is very concerned with relevance or salience, things that'll really catch our attention, but have very little truth value. So that sort of, you know, it's like processed food, ultra processed food or something that leaves us feeling very empty and doesn't help us to transform our lives at all, that distract us, that sort of distract our minds and get our attention, but don't feed our souls at all. Don't help us to transform our souls. So don't help us to be happy and just in fact make us more empty and unhappy. So that's all the sort of the framework and thing that I wanted to talk about today, just to touch on. But do you have any thoughts about this, about how, yeah, there's lots of truth nowadays and lots of relevance, but very little relevant truth. And I guess one thing I think of is that, I mean, in that sort of outline that I just gave of that ancient time, there was the figure of Socrates that emerged, and then Plato. There were Neoplatonists. There was Pythagoras. So there were all these thinkers that emerged as, I don't know, what we call them, thought leaders today, or there was a sort of philosophical, spiritual kind of leaders that I think helped people at that time, Stoics and things that helped people at that time to use truth as a way to transform themselves in their lives and even to gain some sort of to gain insight and some sort of even enlightenment. Plato's Republic has a picture in the allegory of the cave of through dialogue coming to more accurate uh, understanding of sublime truth and gaining like a kind of spiritual enlightenment from it, where first you disengage yourself from common uh, the common illusions of everyday life, and through a long and arduous journey, slowly make your way up towards the truth. So that's a picture of enlightenment. But yeah, do you have ideas of how we're awash, or are we? But I think we are awash in ultra relevant things. And it's very much akin to like the grocery store with this this panoply of colorful, um, flavorful foods that aren't satisfying, rich, nutritious at all. They're
Mhm.
cheap, they're forgettable.
And I'm kind of thinking how like maybe our times aren't so like dissimilar from the past that you're describing, where
Mhm.
we have like the um lots of like true scientific truth around now, like the natural philosophers, but we also have like our sophist equivalents too
Hmm.
at the same time. Yeah, I just started thinking of stuff like conspiracy theories
Mm.
that are like very popular now.
Yeah. Yeah. Conspiracy theories
Uh,
are a good example of, and now I should acknowledge, I mean, sometimes I don't use that as a bludgeon, like for things that I disagree with. At least I hope I don't
yeah,
do that. And sometimes
yeah,
they can be true. It's not like there's no such thing as any conspiracies or any
yeah,
secrets ever, of course. But yeah, but true conspiracy theories seem rife, and people seem quickly to jump to those, at least some people on the internet. Of course, that's a kind of a bad sample of humanity, but seem to anyway, it is like satisfying to jump to conspiracy as a conspiracy theory for an explanation of something that we don't know much about, but we want to
yeah,
say, hey, there are these weird things happening that I don't understand. And it's probably because of some large, powerful, secretive, nefarious forces in the world that I sort of tend to think have a very outsized influence.
yeah. So like, I guess that's emotional relevancy for people
Yeah,
in a way.
emotional relevancy. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
And it's
but
and it's very satisfying emotionally to I'm the one that understands what's going on, and I'm going to tell others, advertise myself as the knower, and then also have other people on board my
mm,
team as people who think that same thing
mhm,
as the enlightened ones.
mhm, yeah. Yeah, and I think maybe a lot of the relevancy parts now nowadays are kind of emotional in a way, kind of meeting that need for people, even if the stuff may not necessarily be true.
Yeah,
Uh,
emotions as opposed to, I don't know, yeah, deeper kind of satisfying things that, yeah, anger especially. And
mm,
again, that's akin to ultra processed foods that are hitting our flavor, I don't know, hitting our taste buds and like or our need
mm,
for certain kinds of textures and things,
mm,
in food, crispiness.
yeah. Yes, I thought of that, and just the other obvious one is just politicians kind of hitting that emotional relevancy a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, Vervaeke gives this great example that comes from The Simpsons, where there are these two politicians that look identical who are talking, and or is this from Futurama? I don't know. Anyway, there's a politician talking, and he gives you a speech with no substance, but like he hits all these major emotional points. Like he says, "My fellow Americans." When I was young, I played baseball and blah blah blah. So he's, like everything he's saying is like something that appeals to people's emotions.
Mm,
Oh, when you were young, nostalgia, childhood, oh, baseball, oh, blah blah blah. And actually at the end of the speech, there's nothing of substance that he says at all, but it hits so many buttons. Yeah, yeah, kind of
mm,
junk food for the soul. Another question Vervaeke asks is like, where do people go for wisdom now? Like we have universities, but I think they've been discredited to some degrees by all the by some to some degree
mm,
by all the political activism. But anyway, even before that, I don't know how much people really thought of universities as being even about knowledge, but especially about wisdom, you know. Like even when I went to school like 20 years ago or so, like I wanted wisdom, but I don't know if I thought of that consciously, but I don't know if I had that idea even then. Even then, politicians were, and subsequently, were talking about universities as like a place to get a practical education where you get a degree that helps you to make money afterwards, and that's the virtue of it. That's the good thing about it. But where do you think people go for wisdom now?
Um, well, I think I noticed when I talk to people around my age, like a lot of them like indicate like an interest in Eastern religions, like Buddhism and stuff. So, um,
Yeah, I think we
yeah,
have more trust of like Eastern religious figures than our own religious figures in general.
yeah. So I notice it's like more socially acceptable to say like you're interested in Buddhist or Buddhism, and it's compared to saying you're like Christian or
But people aren't,
Muslim or
it's not like they're really going to temples and
yeah.
really studying
No.
the texts and things, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
talking deeply to the people
Yeah.
so that is kind of a, I don't know, placeholder or kind of just something people have a feeling about, but they don't really, they can't really go there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe some
Yeah.
people they'll buy a book
Yeah.
or start meditation or something like that, and there's some substance there, but aren't
Yeah. I
people
think
pretty
it's
lost, like for wisdom?
yeah, I'd say yeah, like it's mostly surface level interest I see for Eastern stuff, so there isn't really much
Is wisdom
going
even
on.
something that people think to seek anymore? I mean, you and I just have been talking about truth, uh, but truth isn't enough. You need truth to be relevant. Anyway, yeah, people need wisdom, but both sort of more practical on the everyday level and also sort of deeper for longer term, sort of broader guidance. But do people even generally seek wisdom now? As I feel like wisdom is not a very high value word.
No, it's like I think our high value word is like success or something like
Yeah, success
uh
is a big
and
one. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not imagining spiritual or with success or something like that, but more like along the materialistic uh end.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're not talking about success in a deeper sense of life, although there is maybe a little bit of that. Some work-life balance or something like that. There's a little bit of that
yeah,
attached sometimes or often, but
yeah, I'd say a little bit of that and maybe taking care of your health on a surface level.
right,
Um,
health and
but
maybe a little mental health in there too.
but yeah, I don't really see wisdom though in, among those attributes of what success means.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like I don't even know how people think of wisdom anymore. This may be something to talk to people about or anybody listening if they want to chime in the comments. But yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like we don't know what wisdom is, and we don't care that much, or we don't know that it should be sought after, even, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. There's that. Like, I remember last week I had a hard time figuring out what an ideal man was.
Hmm.
So just basic stuff. Uh, we are kind of lost on our stuff that,
Yeah, yeah. We're very practical, right? Success and problem solving, conflict resolution. Yeah, we know that we don't want to be in violent altercations with people. We know we don't want to go to jail. We know we want to have money. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the having a lot of the the value attached to success is because of status and how others view you, the opinion that others have of you. I think we very much want to be liked. And, it's hard to think that mass media and the internet and social media those have had a lot to do with this, right? Where I think we more and more have been emphasizing and had our mind on what others think of us, what others see when they see us, and trying to influence that, trying to gain adulation, if not notoriety. Yeah, success, I think, success is maybe the most important word that people have nowadays, huh?
Yeah.
Mm.
Success. What's another one? Mm,
But yeah, whatever words we think of, I mean, it seems like they go in the practical category, like I
mhm.
was mentioning. So we know we want to get along with other people to some extent, and that we want others to like us. We don't want to go to jail. We want to be able to support ourselves, and at a high level, uh, we want others to like us. We want to feel loved. But yeah, all those are pretty practical stuff. We don't have these deeper ideas. With truth, I think we often are thinking of facts or principles, but of maybe more, again, like scientific worldview of the physical world, and not so much of, I don't know, metaphysics or of yeah, of deeper, like we were talking about earlier, deeper, relevant truths that help lead, like that Platonic allegory of the cave, that help lead to enlightenment, self-transformation, insight, growth, happiness. What do you do, or what ideas of that do you have?
Mm.
That's actually for me, that's actually part of the idea of this podcast is to try to kind of come to some mutual understanding with guests, and maybe in some ancillary way, even with viewers, of a greater ideas of truth, refining the truth, that kind of Platonic dialogue sort
You
of.
mean like you mean like how to get closer to that
Hmm.
in some way? Mm.
Hmm.
Well, I would say like meditation
Yeah, that's
would
what I
be
was
one
thinking of
way.
too.
Um, and so I'm glad like Stoicism is becoming more popular so that there's
Mm.
one form out there that people are learning about.
Mm.
Um,
Does Stoicism help you?
yeah, I think it's really good. And it's just like really easy to incorporate because it's not like something you have to spend a lot of time on necessarily like when you do that. So um I like that.
Mm.
So I'd say oh yeah, and I just noticed the Waking Up app uploaded a new series today on it. So
Yeah, me too. I was
yeah.
thinking of mentioning that. It looks pretty good. It's by a
Mhm.
psychotherapist.
Yeah, so I'd say meditation and maybe like when you see stuff on the internet or social media, like trying to look at what it's really like trying to say. And I think that way once you start thinking uh, critically about it, like you might start to weed out a lot of what's just BS that's not
Yeah,
really relevant or that may not be truthful.
yeah.
So not taking things at face value or accepting them, um, like when you see it, I guess, or
Yeah. Yeah, not accepting immediately, not
uh,
reacting, yeah, not running with your thoughts.
huh, um, see, that's another way. Uh, and yeah, maybe just like talking to people, like we're doing now a little bit. Uh,
Yeah, I think with, yeah, the way people talk to each other and who you're talking to ultimately, yeah, will help to shape your mind. If the conversation is more rational, more compassionate, more attentive, if people are less, yeah, if you're listening and not just kind of concerned with getting your point across and talking a lot or something, yeah.
mhm.
If you're kind of mindful of the emotions that are going on, if things are starting to get kind of dark or kind of, are you starting to support a black and white worldview of, or like, of other people? Like, are you starting to vilify or um, sanctify others, whatever the opposite of vilify is? Yeah, if you're starting to engage in cognitive distortions together. Again, getting back to Stoicism, black and white worldview, and other cognitive distortions.
And I think that all of those things ultimately, like, yeah, really help you, like, kind of examine yourself, like you're saying,
Yeah,
um, because that's where our greatest distortions will come from. Uh,
yeah, yeah. Wait, where are you talking about? Like from other people? Yeah, of
yeah,
course,
well,
from other
yeah,
people. Yeah,
but then like from ourselves too. So,
right. From
like
people
you're saying,
and including ourselves. Yeah. Yeah, I've mentioned how in a lot of philosophers talk about it's kind of like the ultimate enemy is yourself. And I think that's part of the mythology of the Buddha's enlightenment is that like in the end he sat under the Bodhi tree, and before he'd gone to many different teachers and he'd learned things from them, but ultimately felt they were not going to provide what he was looking for. And ultimately, he sat down under the Bodhi tree. And then he was confronted by all these forces of Mara, I think, and desire. And, you know, I look at that as like, yeah, the top, if this is like a video game, the top level boss is yourself. So, yeah. Before we go, I wanted to mention again this idea of Rousseau's that I think is very important. The art of being ignorant. I think that's something that isn't talked that much about, but is a wonderful concept because it is so hard to know the truth sometimes, but you can kind of just know in many situations that you don't need to know that much, that there's many things that you don't need to investigate for, the betterment of your life, for your happiness. You just don't, you often can't know and you don't need to investigate, you know. There's much more, I think, to that idea, but I can't articulate it very thoroughly here, but that's something that I wanted to bring up. But is there anything else that you wanted to talk about
um,
truth and relevance?
that bit, I just had the thought that, yeah, just the interconnectedness or virtual interconnectedness is feeding a lot of that. Um,
Feeding a lot
need
of
to know everything and
mm,
like need this urge to not be ignorant and stuff. Um,
to not seem
and it's
ignorant, maybe.
yeah, and I guess it's just causing more anxiety and
Yeah. Yeah,
other mental
anxiety, I
health
think.
problems.
Yeah. you can think that you need to know everything, you need to keep up with
Mm,
everything, uh, and you really don't. You never will, you never could, and so you don't need to try. That's not to say that you shouldn't be informed, especially in a democracy, but yeah, you do have to need to know what you truly need to know, and what do you do with the rest? Just sort of let it pass by. Okay. Well, talk more about this next time, maybe.